क्लीं कैवल्य
Namaste and welcome to Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam. Sorry for a slight delay. Suddenly, almost everything died on us. So I hope we are back to normal and the audio is clear. Please let us know. Maya's taken a short break from her work. She's here for 5 minutes. She'll check and let me know if there is any issue, but otherwise we seem to be back here. So thank you for coming into the class. Let us begin this class with 3 ohms. All right. That's what happens, I guess, when you take a long break and come back. Even though we did some preliminary testing and everything, some batteries was not charged and whatever. So we are back here. Today's class and the series now will be, as part of the Kaivalya Marga classes, will be, thank you Maya, she's gone back to work. So thank you, I'm sorry. Today's class, there will be a series on the water element. It'll take a few minutes for my mind to get settled. It's been very distracted. And we're going to talk about water and taming the water element, ironically. That's the fun of, I guess, things being online and live. It's real. Okay, if this was a pre-recorded thing, all this would have been edited, right? You would have seen a very calm Sundar. But this is real and I like that way. The series is going to be on water element. We did a considerable detailed study of the earth element, at least to get us started with. And now we are coming into the water element. We started this a few weeks ago. We had the first class where we visited the Jambukeshwar temple. Jambukeshwar temple is much more easier to pronounce than Thiruvanai Kaval Koil. So that's the Tamil name for that temple, the Tamil name. And this is the more common, the more simpler version, Jambukeshwar or Jambukeshwarar temple. We were there and we discussed about how to channelize energies and how I got inspired, and we started our first temple project there. And as a response to that, quite a few of you have responded and offered your interest in being part of it. And so I'm so very, very grateful. And for those of you who have donated for that particular amount, we've kept it aside. We don't have an ongoing project as such, but we are kind of identifying a few. But anyway, that we'll keep that separate. And since I'm trying to link the last class with this, and that's why I'm making a reference to that. This is by no means any solicitation of any funds or any donation. I don't want to get into that. So we'll leave that for now. The class today is going to be about how we understand the water element in our body and begin to harness and transmute that energy and move it upward. Even as we enter into this class, please understand that the water and the earth element have something in common which the other 3 elements, fire, air, and space, do not have. And that is gravity. gravity. Water and earth both tend to flow downwards. So whenever there is more of that element in our consciousness, in our lifestyle, in our body, and all of that, always know that there is a pull downwards. And so the higher elements, the lighter elements, the prana to move upwards, it becomes more difficult. So when we talk about the vayus, when we come to the chest, we'll get a much better picture of all of this, because I'll refer to all of this and say how the vayus are affected. The way we study this kind of subject is difficult because there are so many references to things we have not yet studied. So it might be very difficult for you to relate to them at this point. But when we talk of the apana vayu, for example, a vayu that creates downward pressure, when you want to go to the bathroom, when the body wants to get rid of food, there the apana vayu activates the water element and the earth element, right? And so the pressure is downwards, is easy for it. So when the water and the earth element are more, then the apana vayu becomes more active. The downward pressure is more active. And so for it to turn and move upwards, it becomes difficult. I promise you that all of this, at least in a theoretical understanding, will become more clearer once we complete all the 5 elements. But for now, just understand that water and earth element are gravity oriented. In other words, they flow with gravity. They are very heavy. The earth being the heaviest, and then comes water. All right. The only thing that can convert this energy and move it upwards is fire. So that comes to the next element. But we'll come to that. Let us go back to the slides here. And to begin the water element, we need to understand 2 important things. And we are starting with, how does it affect me, right? We are not talking of the universe and all of that. It's understood. If I understand the microcosm, the macrocosm falls in place. And you will understand the relation between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And so we are focused on the water element in me. How do I take the lifestyle? What do I eat? What do I think? What do I do in order to harness the water element? Okay? So in today's class, let's take the basic building blocks of water element. Some of this might be a repetition for those of you who have already mastered the basics, but it's important here for us to revise this, because this has to be in your deeply embedded, if you will, in the subconscious, unconscious mind. If you're woken up from the depths of your sleep and asked, you should be able to tell it. So deeply it should be ingrained, this knowledge of earth and water. What is that? Of course, this is a picture of the temple. So with the blessings of the Shiva there, let's begin this class. The most important thing is, where is this water element located? This is predominantly located in the Swadhisthana chakra. Swadhisthana chakra, or the vortex of energy, that is just above the earth chakra, which is the Mooladhara chakra. From there, it's almost together. Earth and water are literally enmeshed into each other, literally speaking. But for the purposes of clarity, we seem to see them as separate. Mildly, only because in our bodies also, the sexual organ is slightly above the anal region, and that's all. But otherwise, for all practical purposes, water and earth, just like you see in the earth outside, where does water reside? In the earth. It cuts into the earth, and earth supports water. So earth and water are very closely related because they both obey the laws of gravity. In our body, predominantly, it is located in the Swadhisthana chakra region, in the region of the sexual organs. Earth element, like we said, resides below that, in the region of the anus and below. It's all thighs, and legs are all just muscles and bones, correct? Of course, there is blood flowing, but predominantly. So in this region of the sexual organs are the urinary bladder, the kidneys, and all of that processing of the fluids. the seminal juices, urine per se is stored there. So a lot of water resides in this area, apart from blood, correct? So this is like a storage place, a storage tank, right? So the water element's capital is here. It's almost like where it is predominantly located, where is the density of water more, it is in this part of the body, and therefore this part of the body is connected with the water element predominantly. Of course, there are tears coming from the eyes, the sweat comes from all over. All of that is also water related. But then it's all processed and located here in the Swadhisthana chakra region. There are always two senses that we have studied now, senses of action or organs of action and organs of perception, correct? Organs of actions are karma indriyas. Karma means it's gross. You can see them. They are just, there's no intelligence in them. They're just organs of action, like hands. It's an organ of action. Unless the brain tells it, it won't work. So, right? So that is karma indriyas, only meant for karma, for doing something. Then there is the organ of perception, jnana indriya. That begins to absorb, perceive, and pass the information to the brain. Is more connected and placed in the brain centers, different parts of the brain. The way you see, what you see, the color you see, how do you see red from black? Because something is processing inside. So there is jnana, there is wisdom in that sense organ. And therefore, there is the sense organ that is jnana indriya. We'll come to those two. So what are these two organs? That is related to the water element. Before we go there, what was related to the earth element? The anus was the organ of action. And the sense of smell was the organ of perception. Correct? Cognition or perception. Now in Swadhisthana, just near the anus is what? The sexual organ. So sexual organ is the organ of action, the karmendriya, which is linked with the water element. It's common sense, because the only thing that flows out of that is seminal juices and urine. Correct? So it is water. Only water comes out of the sexual organ, and therefore sexual organ is directly connected to the water element. Simple. The anus, only solid matter comes out of anus, and therefore anus is related to the earth element. Simple, right? The solid matter that comes out of anus has a very powerful smell component, and therefore it is linked to the sense of smell. Here, the organ of cognition or the organ of perception, in other words, jnana indriya, with relation to water element, with relation to Swadhisthana chakra, is what? The sense of taste or the tongue. The indriya is the tongue. The tongue has saliva in it. The tongue is always wet, correct? Dead people don't have wet tongues. It becomes dry. So the tongue and the sexual organs are connected to the water element. Now we are going to watch one of my talks from the temple. These are all, I can do the talk here as well, but this is directly inspiration, sitting there, contemplating on what should be shared, and put on the camera and I just speak into it. So I have not really found time to edit any of those, and I'm not going to edit them unless there was a coughing or something like that. So we'll watch that, and then we'll take notes from that small little class, and then we will come back and talk more about the water element and its connection. So let us go to Trichinapalli, Trichy, South India, to this most amazing, fascinating temple. Huge in its structure, but again, beautiful. Let us go there and let's see what is in store. It's been a while since I saw that video myself, so let's see that and take it from there. So namaste. In this lesson of Kaivalya Marga, or Kaivalya meditation, if you will, we're going to learn about the water element. How is that water element related to our body? in what particular place in our body is it predominantly placed, what sense organs are associated with the water element, and why here at this temple. What is this temple? So let me begin with that first. I'm here at a temple called Jambukeshwar, Tiruvanai Kaval. Tiruvanai Ka Kovil, Tiruvanai Kaval. It became like that. It's dedicated to the concept of an elephant that was worshipping Yanai. Ka was forest, so Yanai was elephant, and Tiru is of course sacred. So Tiruvanai Kaval. It is said that this temple, where the main deity is of course Shiva, is one of the 5 Panchabhuta Sthalam, meaning one of the temples that is dedicated to the one of the 5 elements. The earth element was in Kanchipuram. The water element is in Tiruchirappalli, shortly called Trichy, in South India, dedicated to the water element of Shiva. In the inner sanctum sanctorum, the lingam is drenched 24/7 in water. Where does this water come from? It's a natural spring from under the earth. In fact, I believe in rainy season, the water even comes up and soaks the lingam much more than what it was today. So this place is predominantly associated with the water element of the Shiva consciousness. Everything is very symbolic, as always with Sanatana Dharma. And one has to understand this with the symbolism. Let me pause here for a second. I have some people passing by. I don't want that to disturb this conversation or this lecture. The temple in India has always traditionally been a place where it was also a community place where people would get together and meet and celebrate, and there was always a festive occasion associated with temples rather than meditation and deep prayer and all. That was also part of it. There are particular times in the temple when it is exceedingly quiet. But in general, people when they come, the silence is the last thing on their minds, I guess. So there is kids running around and people yelling, screaming, even quarreling. I guess that's part of the energy. It's part of being in India. Anyway, let me come back to this topic of the symbolism of this temple. The story here, and you can read these more detailed stories in Google. I don't want to keep repeating what I read on the internet. You can find it yourself. You just Google Jambukeshwar and you'll find the temple's website itself explaining you the legend of this temple. But what I take home, what I learn from that legend is what I want to share with you today. The story goes that there was a spider and an elephant that worshipped Shiva. They were perhaps in conflict with each other or whatever, and therefore this place, the inner sanctorum, which I couldn't take on video, has depiction of the spider and the elephant, both devoted to the Shiva consciousness. And the story goes on that the spider goes into the elephant's ear and kills it, and so on, and gets reborn as a king, and therefore that king is one who built this temple to carry on his devotion. And since he didn't want an elephant to come into the temple, he built the actual entrance to the temple is extremely low. It's just about 4 feet high and about 2.5 feet wide. I don't think even a baby elephant can fit in. So that's the story behind it, right? But to me, this also being associated with water element, I was meditating on how there is water element and then there is a symbolism of spider and elephant. How do these relate to water element? And what dawned to me, what the Shiva consciousness blessed me with, is what I made peace with. I like it and I want to share that perspective with you. The water element can be as thin and delicate as the spider's web. You know, when water seeps into your house, you won't even know it. Just like a spider in a corner building a web, you'll have no idea till one day you'll find webs all over and you're like, oh my gosh, this house needs cleaning. I remember once in Sai Baba's room I was cleaning, and we cleaned up, 2 or 3 of us, we cleaned up the entire room because he said the president is coming, keep it clean. It was always clean, but you know, Baba was somebody who was for perfection. So we spent 2 hours cleaning every nook and corner, every window pane. And then he walks from upstairs, and within like half a second he just came down. He said, "You guys are lazy." And we were wondering what happened. He said, "Look up." And there was a tiny spider's web there. He said, "Watch, watch." And so, of course, we were stunned as to how could he even, he didn't come look around and say, "Oh, that's corner, you're not clean." He just knew. But anyway, that story came to my mind about spider's web. It's so fragile and it's so subtle, it can creep in without your knowledge, right? Spiders are like that, they're creepy. And when they crawl, actually, there's a flow to it. So if you have hundreds of spiders, I know that's not a good vision, but hundreds of spiders crawling, it's almost like water flowing. So there is that thin element of water, the subtle element of water. It can be as subtle as a spider's web. It can also be as powerful as the elephant. You know how floods can destroy hundreds of years of building, rock and concrete and all of that, right? That is the elephantine power of water. But water can also be spider-like. And they are perhaps in conflict with each other in the sense of one is extremely subtle, one is extremely powerful. It is important for us to understand this. It is important for us to meditate upon this. So in this class, in this lesson, because when we understand the water element in our body, we have to know the subtleness of this water element and the powerful part of the water element. So, having said that, let's see where exactly is this water element situated in our body. We learned now that the earth element is in the anus and below. Buttocks region of the buttocks and the thighs and all of that is just pure earth because it's just muscle and fat and bones and nothing else. Well, I say nothing else, just take it with a pinch of salt because there is blood flowing, but predominantly earth. Just above that, below the navel and above the anal region, the region of the sexual organs as it is generally said, is the water element. Why? Think of urinary bladder, think of the kidneys. A lot of processing takes place, and the sexual organ is used for dual purposes. One is to pass out urine, like the elephant, it just boom, comes out, it's very gross, it's very seen, it's heard, it smells. And then you have the subtle, the seminal juices, the semen and the seminal juices is very subtle like the spider. It's powerful, but it's very subtle. So you have the seminal juices, because it's powerful, because it's got power to create life, right? Seminal juices. So you have semen or seminal juices, and then you have the urine that passes out of sexual organ. Both are watery in nature, and therefore the sexual organ is the organ, physical organ, that is connected to the water element. So if you talk of the organ of action, karmendriya, the sex organ, the organ of action is connected to the water element. Then you have the organ of perception, the jnana indriyas, the one with a little more intelligence, and that is the tongue. So the tongue, remember, it's not mouth to speak, it's tongue to taste. Tongue, sense of taste. So tongue that is used to taste needs water. Saliva in the mouth is where digestion begins, right? A dead man's tongue is not wet, can never be wet, right? It dries up almost instantaneously. When you're sick and you have disease in the body, then very often you find that the sense of taste is lost, correct? When you are on heavy medication after a flu or a viral or whatever, you notice, or even in times of severe cough and cold, when you're taking some medication, you'll notice that you lose a sense of taste, and your water goes, the secretion of saliva goes down considerably. So that is why a matter of health, they say stick your tongue out and they'll see the health of the color of the tongue. So the tongue and the sexual organ, again two extremities in your body, are connected to the water element. When we understand, and therefore the second chakra, the Swadhisthana, is a reference point for the water element. Just as the Mooladhara, the sacral region, or the just like the Mooladhara, which is at the base of the spine,
This is the sacral part of the spine, the sexual region, which is Swadhisthana. Swadhisthana chakra, this is where the senses reside. Now one has to understand that the water element is connected to all the senses. Tearing of the eyes, there is element of water in the nose, ears, and so on. And therefore, one has to understand the relation between water and senses in general, the tongue in particular. Because one way to control all the senses, and I'll come to that controlling part in a little bit, because it's important to understand its role in understanding the water element. The water's relation with the tongue, and once one learns to control the tongue, the sense of taste, then one is able to exert a stronger influence and control over all the other senses, namely the sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of touch, and the sense of hearing, the sense of sound. So all of the other senses come under control. The tongue is one of the most powerful sense that takes you away from your spiritual path, or causes distraction, if you will. And look at us today as a society, as a community. We have enslaved ourselves, and I'm speaking generally, to the tongue, right? Most of our conversations is about how tasty the food is. So where do you get the food, which restaurant you ate food, and what is the next meal, how to plan the meal, and what kind of sweet to have, and so on and so forth. The tongue seems to dominate our lifestyle to a large extent. And guess what? Because the tongue is dominating, and I am not dominating my tongue is dominating me, then I eat what my tongue likes. It's almost like it's got a life of its own now. So it's dictating to me, and I become enslaved to the sense. And because I'm enslaved to the sense, this little tongue that is hidden for most part actually is the cause of my sickness or health. Period. So you can imagine how tongue is so powerful, and therefore the sense of taste is considered very powerful. If I'm able to control the sense of taste, then I can control all the other organs in my body. Okay. So that leads us to food and the sixth sense of taste, and we'll come to that perhaps a little later. But I want to introduce a concept here, the idea of sense control. Why was sense control such an important, or why is sense control such an important part of the yoga practice, the traditional yoga practice?
All right. So there is a lot of matter in that video. But let's see how to digest some of the information that we just heard. The story of the elephant, the symbolism of elephant and spider, and the story behind that goes into this temple. Now, anytime you listen to these stories at a superfluous level, you say, these people were crazy, they didn't know what they were writing and doing. But if you see the beauty of the temple, the mathematics and the geometry and the architecture and so on, you have to be foolish to come to such a conclusion. There was obviously a symbolism, a poetry, an unraveling that was required, because that was the way of Sanatana Dharma being taught. That was the way of the Vedanta. They want you to do some homework. They'll give you a story, a symbolism, and then you decide, oh gosh, what does it mean? There must be something to this riddle. There has to be some meaning to this. And then when it dawns to you and your heart begins to make peace with that, at that point in time, because another meaning might reveal itself later, then your understanding becomes more powerful. Your intuition grows. So I love the symbolism of all these stories, especially in these temples. And so it's interesting to know that they used elephant and the spider. And like I said, I made peace with that, understanding that water is as subtle as a spider and as powerful as the elephant. even if you take the two sense organs, the sexual organ can be considered to be the elephant, and the subtle tongue can be the spider. Both are powerful in their nature, and both are connected to the water element. And maybe that was a symbolism, and that connection there played a role in that story. So let's go back to the slides and see what we have in store there. Where am I? There. Elephant and the spider, the powers of the water element. I want you all to meditate on this. When I use the word meditate in these classes, I know a lot of people have asked me, you say meditate, what do you mean by that? When we meditate, we shouldn't have thoughts, but you're making us think. You see, in traditional Hatha Yoga, the term dhyana was more of contemplation. And samadhi was that point where there is no thought and all of that. So that state of no thought is gifted to you. You can't practice that. So you take, for me, so I use it in a very lighter way. When I say meditate, I'm just saying you take a thought and go deep into that. Close your eyes and say, all right, I'm going to think about it, what it means to me, and just delve into that. Allow the intuition to awaken. To a certain extent, intellect will work, analysis will work, but at some point it will stop. Beyond that, your understanding may not become clear. Then you allow the intuition to awaken. And then the light bulb goes off and you say, oh yes, now I see it. That is what we need to awaken. So that is why I keep saying, take this in the class and meditate, because that is that manana. Contemplation and meditation go together there. The manana is contemplating on these ideas. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he talks about different forms of dhyana, and he says when you get dreams, meditate on a dream, meditate on a concept, meditate on asanas. So like that, there is meditation, different types of meditations that are prescribed in the Yoga Sutras as well. Someday we'll explore all of that. But you understand, when I say the word meditate is more of contemplation, if you will, on what does this mean to you? How will you understand it? And there's a better perspective, please, or a different perspective, please feel free to share it with me, and I'll share it with everyone. So elephant and spider, think about that, and that connection with the water element. When the power of the water becomes like the elephant, then you can't control an elephant. You can control a spider. You can smash a spider, or you can blow it and the spider can go away. It's easier to control the spider, but yet the spider is very poisonous. It creeps in. You won't even know it is there. So all that is there. Like the subtleness makes it more powerful, more creepy, if you will, than the elephant. So the temple, the way the sanctum sanctorum was done is very interesting there. So, and I think I explained it in another video, or I don't know if I talked about that here. But the sanctum sanctorum, the innermost shrine, is done in such a way that the doorway is very tiny. It's about 4 feet high and about 3 feet wide. So even a baby elephant cannot go in. Perhaps it was designed to teach us a lesson. But let me go through these points here and come to that. So the sexual organ, elephant, could be the sense of action, karma indriya, and the sense of taste, the spider, can be jnana indriya. Spider has poison in it, right? You don't want to be bit by a spider. The tongue inherently doesn't have any poison, but you get enslaved to things that are poisonous to the body. White sugar is a great example. We'll talk about more of white sugar when we talk about the fire element and food and all of that. Sugar per se is poison. But what can we do? We are enslaved to that. And white sugar is even more. So when in traditions, in traditional scriptures, when they say shakara, which is sugar, they're not talking of the sugar you and I buy in the commercial market now at all. It is completely unprocessed sugar. It is jaggery and completely unprocessed. It's nothing to do with what you and I buy in the store today. So that's besides the point. Here, we get slaved to the poison. So now, where is the poison? The tongue. The tongue creates the poison because you eat stuff which is not good for you. Eventually, you start getting. We have seen that, right? In general, in society, in communities now, are we getting healthier with all this knowledge and medical advance and all of that? Why aren't we getting healthier? In fact, if anything, there are more diseases now than earlier. Why? Because of lifestyle, and especially because of food habits. Because of the kind of food we eat, the kind of exercise and diet and active lifestyle goes down, because food makes us more heavier, more, so the water and the earth element begins to drag us down. The rest is history. So spider is the tongue. The spider is in us. That's how I understand it. The subtler it is, the more powerful it is. Baba would very playfully say, there is this little tongue which is inside your mouth, not even seen, and that little thing controls the way you think, the way you eat, the way you live. Everything is controlled by that little subtle, soft little tongue. Think of that, he would say. And he himself lived a life of tremendous control over the tongue. It's amazing to watch Baba. He never touched sweet. Even when he would come to our dorms, we would offer him, of course, Baba would feed us all the laddus, but he would, and if it's from his hands, I would eat anything. I would eat 1,000 laddus if he were to give it to me. I wouldn't care about health and all of that, right? Those things are besides the point when a Sadguru does it, and especially somebody like Baba. So that was besides the point. But he would never, he would give us all laddus, but he would never touch it. And when we want him to eat, we'll say, Baba, you eat something. He'll put his finger on it and do like this and say, oh, okay, good, very good, happy. But it always amazed me. And to me, if I'm able to practice some element of control in my food, he's an inspiration. He's an inspiration for me. Because I saw him live such a strict life. We would say Baba loves watermelon because it will get very hot in Puttaparthi, in Andhra Pradesh, in summer. Many of you from South India would perhaps relate to that. Very, very, very hot. And he is living upstairs, and there's no really a floor above him. And so his room would get very warm. So in the afternoons, he would be sitting in the sofa with a ceiling fan on, and his button on his robe will be open. And I would feel sorry for him because it will be so hot. And at those times, he would have watermelon to perhaps cool his system, or they would say he loves it. But when you and I say we love something, the size of the bowl is much, much larger, right? Oh, I love popcorn. And somebody gives you a little bit, a handful of popcorn, you'll be like, wait, what is this? This doesn't even, I can't even begin liking it yet. I want that big, whatever they call it, king size or jumbo size popcorn. They call it bucket these days, I believe, in the theaters. So you need a bucket of popcorn to eat because you love popcorn. When I say I love something, that's what happens. When Baba would say he likes it, or when we understood Baba loves it, understand that it is 4 or 5 pieces of watermelon. Literally 4 or 5 pieces of watermelon and a half a glass or 3/4 glass of buttermilk he would have in peak summer. So this is how he was. This is how for him, it was not a matter of willpower and control. It was just like that. That was a reflection of that harnessed element of water in his body. The way I understood, the way I learned from that, right? Baba lives a life so that we can learn from every aspect of his life and bring it into our lives. And so, if I ever get tempted, I ask, did Baba eat this? No. So then my temptation drops down 90%, and there's only 10% temptation, which anyway goes away over a period of time. I'm not perfect at it yet, but I am grateful that I am not really interested in food and sweets and all of that. So that is good for me. It's worked its way out. But the sense of taste is so very, very, very important, even from a health perspective, right? I'm just talking all of this from a merely health perspective. But when you take that to another level and understand it from a yoga perspective, it becomes even more important. So here, before we go any further, there was this question of why is the door of the sanctum sanctorum so small that no elephant can enter? Before we go there, the story goes that the spider and the elephant were devotees of Shiva, and the spider would weave a web over the lingam, so that, because it was under a tree, it was a forest those days. I mean, you're talking of yugas and yugas before, where the portal was discovered, where the linga was existing. And then the temples were built around it, right? This temple that is existing today was built over thousands of years. So the spider would apparently build a web over so that the leaves from the tree will not fall, the dried leaves and all will not fall on Shiva. And then he could do his worship. The elephant would go, because both of them were devotees of Shiva. The elephant would go to the river, fill his trunk with water, come here, and he'll do abhishekam to the linga. In other words, he will pour water over the linga, and so that will destroy the web. And so that happens. So the spider and the elephant often engaged in this conflict, constantly in conflict with each other. Why am I sharing this? Is I want you to take these things as homework and see what does that mean, this conflict of the spider versus the elephant, the subtleness of the water and the power of the water. One can be controlled, one cannot be controlled. So the story goes that the spider enters the elephant's ear and kills it, and the elephant dies. It's something to do with the sense of hearing. Think about that. And I don't have to spell all this, okay? You can make up your own, when I say make up, means think about it and find the logic and how you can relate to that symbolism. So then the spider is reborn again, because he was responsible for killing the elephant. He's reborn again as a king, and then he builds this temple. But at some level he remembers this his enmity with the elephant, and therefore, as the story goes, the sanctum sanctorum of the temple is extremely small. So they attribute the building of the temple to a particular king who believes that he was the spider and so on. But to me, the symbolism of that small little entrance, that temple is an amazing place. To even go into the sanctum sanctorum of where the lingam is, that's one point. Then there is another a huge room where all of these carvings are put, very, very richly done. Words fail me. I have not seen another temple so beautiful there. Everything is very, very symbolic and beautiful. Anyway, so to me, the way I understand it is, once the water element in your body, even to the size of a baby elephant, you cannot, it becomes a problem. You don't want that elephantine energy of the water. In other words, water becomes more, it's difficult to control an elephant, right? And so that has no place in the Shiva consciousness. In other words, when the senses go out of control, and we'll talk about this controlling and all of that, what is the logic behind all of this control, right? We'll talk about that. We might have time today just at least to see the video, and we'll take follow-up from the next class. But the moment this subtle water, this gentle water, the life-giving water that you sip suddenly becomes a flood, then you cannot control it. You can't harness the energies from a storm. You harness energies from a water that you can control. Then you harness electricity and fire and so on. So the meaning there is that you have to be very soft and very subtle. The water element has to be gentle for you to even be able to enter. And therefore you bend down and go into the sanctum sanctorum. It is very, very beautiful that how one was the theoretical aspect, the conceptual aspect of the symbolism, but the temples were actually built around it. So you and I can go and see these temples. There is another temple in Kanchipuram where you, the way you go around, in these temples, for many of you from India would relate to this, you go around the temple because you think this temple is the universe, and therefore I go around it. Circumambulation of the temple. Parikrama, as they call it in Hindi. So in this particular temple, it's a Shiva temple. You go through it in such a, not everybody can do this. You go through it as if you're going through a birth canal. So you have to literally crawl and go around and come out. It's like birth and death concept. So not many people can do it because of the age or size of the body and so on, physical fitness and so on. You can't complete it. And they say once you enter, don't look back. You only have to look forward to the next birth. You can't look back. There's no past. And so it's amazing to see that in these traditions, there is this beautiful part of symbolism. Actually, you go through that and you begin to understand that how deep were the thought processes that inspired these architects, these kings, these great sages who guided these kings to bring this to the common man, and everybody understood the symbolism behind divinity and how all of that affects our everyday life. So, elephant and spider, two different sides of water. Water can be soft, water can be subtle, water can be powerful and uncontrollable and huge. Think of a river, controlled. Think of a flood, uncontrolled. And if all that is related to the sense of taste, and the tongue is related to the sexual organ, and all of that is related to the senses. Now, I did mention in this video about, we will take the other video in the next class. I will perhaps stop with this. And it doesn't matter if it's a shorter class. We're going to meet again the day after tomorrow. So we'll continue this trend of thought. Why is a sense of taste considered so important when it comes to control? The eyes see, the ears hear the sound, the nose smells, the tongue takes an object from outside and actually experiences it, and you can experience it. See, sound just enters just like that, right? I'm speaking to you. You have time to process what I have spoken after it's entered you. I cannot speak in slow motion and enter it slowly, because then you won't understand what I'm saying. If I say, I am going, sorry, I'm being a little dramatic. If I do that, it doesn't make sense. So it goes inside, the sound goes inside, and then you process the information, correct? Even if it's at a lightning speed. Like if you're understanding what I'm speaking, my language, my tone, my diction, my accent and so on, that is happening at a lightning speed, but the sound is reached inside and then doing. Same thing with eyes and nose. In the mouth, in the sense of taste, you have time to process the information right on the sense organ. So I take an apple, it doesn't go inside and then I say, oh, I enjoyed the taste. I'm eating the apple, I bite into the apple, and as it touches the tongue, I begin to experience the delight, the taste of that apple. It's like experiencing the sense in slow motion, right? If you think of yourself on a hot afternoon in South India, it's very easy to imagine that, or in Florida, Trinidad, in the Caribbean, hot afternoon, and you're very, very thirsty, and there is this little child with a lemonade stand, and you see cold lemonade. See, just the thought brings water to your tongue, right? That is how, and when you sip it, the joy that you get in that first sip of that cold lemonade, that is where the brain centers just burst. That experience of that first sip of the lemonade on a hot afternoon, or the touch of that pickle on the tip of your tongue, that experience, the second, a few seconds of that, is the same as a sexual experience. It's an explosion. Because there, the tongue actually experiences, your mind, your brain experiences at that moment, not after the fact. Something for you to think. And therefore, that's all because of the water element. That is how powerful the water element is in the body. And that is why the whole concept of watch what you eat, the tongue has to be under control, and so on has come. And because of our inability to control the tongue, resulting in a lot of diseases and health issues, is all because of what kind of food that we have eaten. And we can, of course, reverse it. But it becomes more difficult to reverse something, right? It takes time. And with age and other complications, it becomes even more difficult. But if we bring this into our lifestyle and understand that the tongue as that one sense organ which has the ability to slow down the sensual experience and give you the experience as it is happening, not after the fact. The brain is not processing it after the fact. That is the power of the spider. It crawls and then it gives you that. You experience the sense organ right there. So the tongue becomes a very important thing. The tongue gives you the idea of an experience. The tongue gives you an idea of the experience because it goes inside. You are actually experiencing it going inside, and you say, yes, I know what an apple, not only what an apple looks like, I know what is an apple. I know the taste of an apple, and so on. The whole experience becomes real to you. So tongue relates to the concept of experience. Experience. All the senses also relate, but tongue is the most powerful there. And that is why the tongue is connected to the sexual organ. There is a deep connection with the tongue and the sexual organ, apart from the water. And if you understand, if you are able to control the water element in your body, automatically the tongue comes under control. If you control the tongue, the water element in your body comes under control. Why do we need to control the water element in the body? Because water has a tendency to flow down. We want the energy from the water, the prana from the water, to move upwards. The life force that I get from the water, I want it to move upwards. If the water is used and if the senses if I begin to indulge in senses, in other words, engage myself and be run by the senses, then the water, the prana that is in the water, I'm not able to use it for my spiritual purpose, for my creativity, for higher things. I can't. When I say higher things and spiritual purposes, don't get religious about it. Very simply, if you are, let's say, simple things like if you are engaging in painting or drawing, at that moment, you are most creative, right? And at that moment, the last thing you want is something tasty and something distracts you. All of that becomes a distraction. At that moment, you're just engaging in that most creative pursuit, something which you're very passionate about. Food is the last thing on your mind. Taste is the last thing on your mind, right? That's what I mean. So those are moments, but then they don't last very long, right? We come back and we say, oh gosh, what did I miss? Let me go back to indulgence. So when you understand that power of the water, the pranic energy from the water, if you are able to harness that prana, the life force, and then begin to move it upwards, along with bandhas, kriyas, pranayama, all of that. Which is why I keep saying, allow me to say this towards the end of this class, that merely doing pranayama, merely doing Because I know there are somebody says, do this program, everything is taken care of. This breathing exercise, do this, and everything will be done. Do this kriya, everything will be taken care of. I wish it was that easy. It is not. If that was so easy, then there would have been millions and millions of people today walking completely free of disease, aging very gracefully without any medical problems and so on. But it's not the case, right? Why? Because if you practice only a particular kriya, or only a few set of asanas, or only some kind of a breathing exercise, and all of that, without actually bringing this water element under your control as part of your lifestyle, in other words, understanding the relation with the sense of taste, and all of that, we'll explore more of this as we go along. So be patient. But I'm trying to put these seeds of thoughts in your mind so you begin to appreciate where I'm going with this. If I'm not able to do all that in my lifestyle and alone stick to practice, then it makes no sense. We have become enslaved to the tongue to such an extent that we offer sweets to gods because we know we are going to eat it later. Baba doesn't touch sweets. He never ate sweets. So on his birthday, in his altar, why would you offer him sweets? Forget Rama, Krishna and all that. We don't know what they did. So somebody says Rama liked this, Krishna liked it, fine. Krishna loved butter. Butter is good for you. But butter mixed with sweet and butter mixed with sugar, that is bad. Krishna never ate that. He ate organic butter. Organic butter is excellent. Organic milk is excellent for your health. But we don't get that these days. It's very rare that you get it, right? And it's expensive if you get it. So we leave Krishna and Rama aside. I'm just taking an example of Sai Baba for those of us who follow him. And I've seen this in many centers and families and occasions. In the name of Sai Baba, we make sweets. But Sai Baba never touched the sweets. He never wanted them. So what do? We offer it and then we eat it saying, this is prasad, this is prasad. No. We cannot say anything about prasad. We are fooling ourselves. We are cheating ourselves. When I shared this with somebody, they said, but Baba in his ashram has different canteens. He has set canteens for Westerners. He's set canteens for North Indian canteen. There is a South Indian canteen. There are so many kinds of foods. If Baba was against all this, why would he set up all these canteens? That is, he was playing the perfect host. When you come from South India, from Delhi to Andhra Pradesh, and you're coming there for 3 days, 4 days to stay in the ashram, if you start eating that food which you've never eaten in your life, you could be sick, you will have a stomach upset. How will you enjoy those 4 days, 5 days of stay? So Baba said, when you come from some other part of the world, or from North India or some other part, because in India the cuisine is all over the place, right? The North Indian food is very different from South India. So when you come from North India to Baba's ashram, he'd say, eat your own food. Don't try anything new. Stick to what you have been eating. That is a perfect host, right? When you get some guests in your house, what will you do? You give them what you eat? No, you give them what they are accustomed to. So he played the perfect host. He never wanted you to indulge. He didn't want you to say, oh, try one day North Indian, try one day South Indian, enjoy the palate. That is all our making. So he was playing a host. So don't get confused between these issues. Please understand that the sense of taste is very, very important in spiritual sadhana, in spiritual practice. If we are not conquered, you may not conquer it fully, but even if you conquer it to a large extent, then all the other senses come under control automatically. Then the mystical experiences begin to sustain itself, begin to happen. Then higher dimensions open up. Then the Kundalini, when she awakens as this little child, and she guides you very beautifully. The whole spiritual experience becomes wonderful because you are channelizing. The elephant was also worshipping Shiva, right? So this enormous power of the senses, now you're directing it towards the worship, towards more creative aspects, towards the Shiva consciousness. So let us see now how to bring it into action, how to bring it into our everyday, what kind of steps that we can take, small little steps that we can start doing, going in this direction. And so in the next class, we'll explore as to what is the sense control all about, and why was it given such importance in yoga? Was it a religious thing? What was it? What was it? Why do we need to understand this? Perhaps some of you have already got an idea from what in today's class, but we'll explore this more in the next class. As always, thank you so much for watching and being a part of it. We'll meet again the day after tomorrow for continuing the water element. May the Shiva consciousness guide us in understanding this enormous power, this enormous element in our body, and help us and guide us to transmute it so we can harness the energy of the water element in our body and use it for higher purposes. I bring this class to an end with 1 Om and 3 Shantis. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.